Hello, my name is Ryan Freeman. Welcome to my life and welcome to my bedroom. I am shirtless because it's a little hot. There's a lot of fires in California. I hope everyone's safe, but I don't know, it's heated me up a little bit. Actually, I don't think the fires have anything to do with it. I think it's just hot, and I am drinking hot green tea, so I'm a little warm. And my philosophy is comfort first. Never try to impress anyone. Be comfortable. So that's why I am shirtless. And I will be talking about a very controversial topic, religion. Anytime you talk about religion or politics, you're bound to offend someone, and maybe not even please anyone, especially if your slant on religion or politics is idiosyncratic and doesn't fit into a nice, fresh mold. And so I was in a mold. I was in a Christian mold. Then I became sort of very dogmatic and interpreted the Bible very literally, which separated me from the congregation at Pico First Baptist, an evangelical church in Southern California where I grew up. So my own reading sort of separated me from my teachers because what I saw was that what I was reading in the Bible was not how we were practicing Christianity. So I wanted to search for the real thing, and I wanted to become as good with God as I possibly could. This was the only really important thing, because when you believe in the Bible, you believe that your soul is at stake. There's heaven and hell. It's not just about getting a raise or getting brownie points on your report card. It's about the future fate of your entire soul. So for me, God and religion took up a huge part of my life. But what that did end up doing was, and I know I covered this, so this is sort of a recap for those of you who followed me in the last two videos. So what I ended up doing was trying to be as holy as possible, and not masturbating, trying not to fornicate. I did have sexual encounters with women that most normal people would probably say, yeah, that was sex. However, in the way that I interpreted it, because it didn't qualify as genital sex, I didn't find anything through my vast researches with the concordance trying to find out precisely, was I being a sinner? What could I get away with? What I couldn't get away with, right? So sort of using the words of the text to determine what was good, what was bad. Not my own heart, not the Holy Spirit, but words in a book written thousands of years ago, then translated and voted on to see whether or not they would even make the canon. So I didn't know all of that at that time. I just knew that the Bible was the absolute authority. That's what I was taught, so that's what I lived by. That got me into a conflict with my nature, conflict with my body. And whenever you have an inner conflict, like let's say you hate your eyes, you hate your skin color, you hate your family, you hate your country, you hate your whatever it is, it's like a break inside of you psychologically, and you're not in harmony, and then you start to feel terrible, and sometimes this leads to other unforeseen consequences. So I was always trying to be good in the eyes of God. And so something I didn't mention, a couple of the repercussions, I ended up volunteering at I'll get to the Israel story soon. I ended up volunteering at a convalescent home, and I would go on Sundays with a group of elderly men, and we would witness and give church to handicapped people. They were handicapped people, mostly middle-aged and elderly. So we would go around to their rooms and say, all right, Craig, ready for church? And, most of them couldn't speak at all. They were confined to wheelchairs, and we would just wheel our congregation and have a church service after church. This happened when I was 18, 19, and then 20, just before I went to Israel. Because when I went to Israel, my religion changed drastically. And I'm going to get to Israel soon. So I was not only trying to stop myself from committing sins of the flesh through masturbation and fornication, yet acting out, as I mentioned in the last video, inappropriately. I was trying to be a really good witness and preaching, and actually, I have no regrets about that. That was a wonderful time. I loved seeing these people smile and singing songs with them and talking to them. It was a beautiful time at El Encanto, the convalescent home that I gave church service in. Yeah, I have no regrets about that. I think, so I just want to say, because this video and the last couple of videos were sort of criticisms about Christianity. Now, remember, always my perspective, not necessarily does not mean that Christianity is wrong for you or wrong for other people. And I tried to mention a few videos ago or 2 videos ago some of the beautiful parts of Christianity, the community aspect, and sort of giving you a foundational view and image and place in the universe. I think there's a lot to be said about religion. I do not condemn religion, okay? Religion just ended up becoming incompatible with me because of some conflict with my biology, with my nature, my temperament, and I'm sure all of this stuff will unravel before your eyes if it hasn't already. But there's a lot of beautiful things about Christianity, and one is that it got me helping and being a service and at least bringing joy to these people, and by bringing joy to them, it brought joy to me. So that was perhaps a positive benefit. Another thing that happened, and I didn't mention this, I actually didn't want to mention this. I actually thought I wouldn't mention it, but I'm going to mention it because I'm honest. Perhaps my honesty is a result of my Christian upbringing. That would be a positive thing as well. The truth shall set you free. And I have always found the truth shall set you free. So just real quickly, I do want to say that regardless of my criticism towards perhaps how Christianity manifests itself in certain people or certain churches, I love Christ's words. I find so much wisdom in the gospel every time I think of it, and whenever I'm in a bit of a jam, it's often Bible verses from Christ's lips will pop into my head, and I find that they are very, very helpful and very true, especially when I apply them to my life. But with everything, a lot of things get twisted and wrongly expressed, and so I don't hate Christianity and I don't hate the Bible. I have a Bible and I open it occasionally, so I don't hate Christianity, but there is a sort of onus to become a witness and to preach the gospel to the 4 corners of the world, and to do God's work, Christ's work, even if it means you die. In fact, it was a feather in your cap if you actually suffered persecution for being a Christian back in the day. You know, being a martyr was it's like a, I mean, I don't know how people felt. I'm talking about when the Romans were persecuting the Christians in the first couple centuries AD. I'm sure most Christians didn't actually want to be a martyr, but I do think I read in this book. This is the story of Christianity, and I had to get this book. It's by Justo L. Gonzalez, spelled Justo. So I don't know if that's Justo, pronounced in Spanish, or Justo. But I had to get this book in college. It was the history of Christianity class. It was an academic class. The professor was fantastic. He did not push his views on us, but he did give us sort of a neutral, at least a scholarly approach to how the Christian religion was formed. And I believe this book is actually written, my guess is, from a Christian or a Catholic. That's at least my feeling whenever I read him. But I think I read in there that yeah, quite a lot of, it was a very high honor to be a martyr. And for me, when I was on fire for God and trying to become as righteous as possible, and I shouldn't say that it was only, there's of course an element of spiritual pride whenever someone's trying to be spiritual or try to be religious, whether you're trying to be a perfect Christian or a perfect Buddhist or a perfect Hindu, whatever. But really, I did want to please God. I believed in God. I still believe in God. Okay, I believe He had, but how I would define God or even attempt to describe God has changed. So I mentioned I had a miracle when I was a little kid, and my nightmares, the biggest problem in my early childhood life, 3-4 years old, vanished after a prayer. I had another thing happen to me. I didn't mention this. I didn't want to mention this one because this is a little more miraculous, a little less believable from a materialistic viewpoint. But when I was 12 years old, in middle school, I was doing after-school wrestling, and I got a ringworm, 2 things of ringworm on my arm, and interpret this how you will, but I went into my bedroom, closed the door, I had a picture of Jesus, and I prayed over and over and over again, worked myself into a fervor of religious emotion, crying, I'm sure if you've watched my videos, you can see that, my eyes are not always dry. And so a very strong state of feeling. And one thing I will say about religion is it can get you to states of feeling that you cannot get to anything else. Whether you're in jiu-jitsu or work or whatever. Religion, I guess in some ways, I'll get back to the strange miracle that I didn't want to mention, but in some ways I do see religion as sort of a key to our soul or our heart that can just open us up to a vantage of reality or a vantage of life or a new dimension of feeling that nothing else gets there. But of course, whenever you start opening up secret compartments of life and reality, some things can go awry. But I'll get back to that a little bit later. So I got ringworm, 2 things of ringworm. This is my memory, okay? 2 things of ringworm on my arm, and I started praying fervently, started crying, and just, God, in Jesus' name, you said you would grant me grant miracles. I'm quoting Bible verses, and I'm kissing the picture of Jesus and putting it on my ringworm. Kissing the picture of Jesus, putting it on my ringworm. I don't know, maybe I'm glad I didn't get any ringworm on my lips, but I'm in a 12-year-old body and mind. If you remember what you're like at 12 years old, your hormones and your emotions are already high. Now add on a religious faith and testing God, perhaps not the best thing to do, but I did. And believe me or not, that's up to you. Probably you won't. But one of my ringworms disappeared when I removed the picture of Christ. And I was surprised when it happened. I was surprised. I go, oh, holy shit. God healed my ringworm. What the hell? I was surprised, So, I remember my state changed, and I tried to do it on the second ringworm. It did not work. So I ended up having to go to the drugstore and get a little cream for that. And that worked as well, but it took a few days. God works a little faster. So how to interpret that? Well, under strict Christian faith, you would say, yeah, you ask God in Christ's name, and it worked. If you were a skeptic, you would say, you imagined that, you hallucinated that. If you are a Jungian, you would say that was an element of, well, I don't actually know how a Jungian, so Jung, I mentioned this, sorry, I get off topic a lot, but these are my favorite videos because I'm able to pull from various sources of thoughts and memory. If you have not read Carl Gustav Jung would not say he was a Christian, but he wrote a lot about how psychology and Christianity and many other religions tie in. So if anyone is out there who is interested in sort of a psychological approach to religion, Carl Jung is sort of like, he's the Jesus for that. And he had a lot of miracles happen in his life, actually. He calls those synchronicities, where an internal state of feeling, a meaningful internal state of feeling, coincides with a weird occurrence in the physical world. Like, this one of the classic stories, I think, you can correct me in the comments, but basically, I think he was, all right, there was, a patient was talking about a very strange beetle. This beetle had a certain color, blah, 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 very rare in this area of the world. And then suddenly at that point where the patient is telling Carl Jung about this beetle lands on the windowsill, the exact kind, very rare in that area. Probably not the best example. If you look up his book titled Synchronicity, he coined the term, then you will you'll have many examples. I have several other synchronicity stories that I would like to talk to, but not in this video. So whether it was a synchronicity, whether it was a hallucination, whether it was a real miracle, the phenomenon was the same, but it gave me a fire and a belief. And I told myself at 12 years old I would never forget that miracle. So I never did. My faith reinforced by a couple miracles, as well as constantly going to church and youth group and vacation Bible school and summer camp and, family, Christian life. It was everything to me. And I always wanted to take it to the next level. I always felt like I wasn't right inside. Like I wasn't being as good of a Christian as I could be. I'm sure there's probably a lot of Christians who feel like that. I mentioned how guilt and religion can often go hand in hand. So I was driving and listening to Christian radio, and they were talking about, this is when I was 18 years old, they were talking about a pro-life rally in Whittier, California, where I grew up. So I ended up I was pro-life because I was raised in a Republican family and a Christian. I hadn't really thought about that issue that much, but it started to become a bigger thing, going to public speaking classes. It was a topic that we talked about. And I was the guy who who championed the pro-life side. I ended up going to the pro-life rally, and then I met the organizers, and then I said, how can I help you guys? And so then I ended up going to protest in front of a Planned Parenthood in Whittier on Greenleaf every Tuesday and Wednesday morning before I would go to school and then work. So I became an abortion protester. And if you're out there and you have contrary views about abortion, or you had an abortion, I'm not trying to put any guilt on you whatsoever. This video is not even about abortion. Okay, I just want to express, I don't protest abortion clinics anymore. I don't even like to talk about that because I'm not a judge for anyone, okay? But at that time, in my weird way, trying to become a perfect Christian and do more for God, I ended up going to these places. And I even ended up downloading writings and essays written by anti-abortionists that actually went so far as to blow abortion clinics up. So I was becoming radicalized in a way. And I had this martyr mentality because I would get threats protesting out front of the abortion clinic, and that made me feel good. The fact that I was standing up for a righteous cause, even if it killed me. And then even thinking about how have other people, they've really stepped up for God and attacked abortion clinics. I do not promote this whatsoever. And I'm glad Israel came, because Israel came at a point in my life when I wished that I could go there, prayed to God to send me for free. I ended up Googling, finding a free ticket to Israel, going there for free as a Jew, but I only ended up, it happened the day after sort of my whole cornerstone of my faith in God sort of collapsed. Not my cornerstone of faith in God, but the stone that I was holding on to, which was my purity of my flesh, you know, and not enjoying sex and masturbation. So that happened July 13th, 2002. I masturbated for the first time, wrote a poem to God, felt worse. It was the worst, darkest day in my entire life. The next day, playing Warcraft 3, I get a call, Shalom, to go to Israel. I know I'm sort of backtracking, but bear with me. I'll get to the story. And less than a month later, I have a passport, never had a passport before, fly to Israel, awakens it in me just the idea of how amazing it is that you can travel in the world. You know, I had done some trips with families before, but now I'm away from my family. I'm 20 years old, crossing the Atlantic Ocean. There's France. There's a lightning storm over France. I'm landing in Tel Aviv. I'm in Jerusalem, praying at the Western Wall. You know, we went on a bus tour, went to the Jordan River, went to all of these really cool sites as a Jew. And went with the Bedouins. And in the desert with the Bedouins, actually, I met a Russian group. I was the only American. There was this hot Russian girl, Nastya. I was crazy about her. And we had this like little romance because our two groups bumped into each other, and she brought me out into the dark part of the desert away from the Bedouin camp where all of the Americans in my group had sort of, they're smoking hookah and drinking beer and eating. I end up going with these Russians just outside in the darkness, and they're like all tough and looking at me like Russians, and but then they started smiling, talking about Slim Shady, you know, which they loved, and the rapper Eminem, and I just remember thinking how freaking amazing it was to be with the Russians, you know, we're sort of a global village today, so we're all pretty well interconnected, but back then I didn't have a lot of foreign influence. I met a couple British people in my life, but didn't have that much of a foreign influence. So to meet Russians in the desert of Israel, and then what I found out was all of them were not Jewish. They all conned the trip. Some of these Russians who are on the same thing, the free trip to Israel, which is only supposed to be for Jews. Some of them have tattoos of Mother Mary and Christ with thorns, and so funny Russians. And me, an American, with them. Went to the Dead Sea, floated in the Dead Sea. It was a wonderful, beautiful trip. And I could talk about some of the cool aspects of that. But the main point I wanted to talk about is the conflict that I was suffering as a Christian, becoming radicalized, you know, even with postings of how to bomb abortion clinics, you know, and at the same time helping handicapped citizens, and also not masturbating, being a really dysfunctional date. That was how Christianity was affecting me as a teenager. And so I really saw this as another miracle, or you can say, if you're a skeptic, just a random coincidence, or the fact that the timing of how it came right the day after, an answer to my prayer, or a synchronicity, however you want to interpret it. I saw it, that God was going to give me an answer, and he did. So in the group that we were in, 21 young Jews from all over America traveling around, I saw two very great contrasts between two different types of Jews. There were the guys that I hung out with, that I met, and became friends with who were Jewish, who knew some Hebrew, and they loved God, but they loved the world. They loved all people. They had sex, and they know that having sex before marriage wasn't perhaps what their rabbi would advise them to do, but they did, and they loved their sexual life, and they also loved marijuana, and they just loved life. It's a Jew from Santa Cruz that I'm talking about, and as well as another guy, Hans. Hans was crazy because actually his grandfather was a Nazi who persecuted Jews, but then after World War II converted to Judaism. So now he's this Hans, this German, beautiful German Jew. So I met black Jews, all sorts of different kinds of shades. Very cool. Israel's amazing. Jewish people are amazing. Israel's amazing. I want to say that about Israel. I love Israel. I love Israel. Israel's a beautiful country. Israel's a really beautiful country. I got to travel with soldiers, Israeli soldiers who were some of the coolest people. Helped me pick out the best hookah. I couldn't have done that by myself. Israel is such a great country, great people. And I don't want to criticize the religion. This is just what I needed at that time. What I needed at that time may not be what other people need, but what I needed at that time was to see how to resolve this issue. And I saw Jews who embraced life, life in all its aspects, in all people. They had no animosity towards Muslims. The Jews I'm talking about, Hans and the guy from Santa Cruz, they were the exemplars of this that I saw. They were happy. They had a beautiful smile. They loved life. And then there's two guys on the trip. They were extreme Orthodox Jews who had a certain outfit and certain rituals, and they could only eat chips that came from a factory, that everything was blessed by a rabbi. And so they were actually more religious than any Christian I had ever met. They wouldn't even shake a woman's hand. They were as dogmatic of a religious people that I had ever met up to that point. You know, it put me and my Christian faith to shame to see them, like how obedient they were to the laws of their elders and their religion. But what I also saw with them was they didn't have a friendly smile. They weren't bad guys, don't get me wrong. But they didn't really personify love. And they had even made a dark joke on several occasions that they had hoped to kill a Muslim while they were there. Kind of a dark joke, dude. And of course they were joking, but they were kind of true. It was expressing one of their viewpoints. Complete contrast, the Hans and the Santa Cruz Jew. And I just saw, this is just a brief example, I just saw that the most religious Jews that I met on that trip, they were the most hostile to life. They were hostile to people outside of their sect. They were hostile to sex. They were hostile to other forms of food, to herbs. And Hans and the Santa Cruz Jew, they're open with love, with arms wide open, beautiful smile, playing the guitar, to all of life, to fellow Jews, to Christians, to Muslims, to weed, to sex, to life. And that was my lesson. That's what I needed to see. I needed to see it with my eyes. It's like Simon the Doubter, right? Simon the Doubter, the guy in the Bible who's like, I'm not going to believe that Jesus was resurrected unless I see him with my own eyes. And I think it's Simon, right? Maybe it's not Simon. Maybe it's, anyways, the doubter. Let's just call him the doubter. And Jesus actually lets him put his hands right into his flesh, into his scars. Now I'm hung up on his name, because I don't think it is Simon. But in any case, sometimes when we are plagued with doubt, when we are plagued with an issue, a psychological issue, the answers come. The answers come before our eyes like a miracle. And for me, that miracle came right in the form of these two very contrasting expressions of the same religion. One, I want to kill Muslims. I'm not going to touch that food. I'm not going to touch that woman. And I saw that as all connected, this sort of dogmatic approach to religion, following a religion by the book. And then Hans in Santa Cruz, I love life. I love all people. Let's make love. Let's enjoy this life. Same religion, but for them it seemed like rather their God was a book, their God was love. And that's one of the most beautiful passages in the New Testament, that God is love. So when I got back from Israel, I quit protesting at the abortion clinic. I quit going to church. I quit going to El Encanto and witnessing. I just took a step away from my religion and tried to make it more of a personal approach. Now, it sort of happened in a very gradual process. And I was still, although I was separating from my Christian roots, I wasn't quite separate. I still had a lot of fear about leaving the church, had a lot of fear about not going by the Bible, had a lot of worries about how my family would look at me and where my life might go. Still had a lot of guilt, still had a lot of fear, but travel really, one of the miracles about Israel wasn't just to see the resolution of how to approach religion, be it dogmatically or with love. God is love. But it was also this wanderlust that sparked. And so I started becoming a backpacker and a traveler. And that furthered me in a way that I'd never thought possible. So in future videos, I will go into those stories, my backpacking stories that became very powerful determinants on the course of my life. But I wanted to share that story about my conflict with religion. There was a lot of embarrassing things that I actually didn't want to say. We all have an ego that wants to protect ourselves, that doesn't want to give any of our weaknesses up. But the fact is that is my life. That's my life. And I believe there's a lot of people out there that go through similar things, So I hope you guys got something out of that. I hope you're doing well with whatever is your view, your way of life. You have a beautiful view. I would love to hear about it myself. So thank you for watching this video. I hope that I helped someone out there, or at least entertain someone out there. I will see you on the next video, which may be a story to continue on my backpacking stories, where this whole thing picks off and how my view of God has evolved, or it'll be something else. We'll see. Thank you so much, and bye.